So again, thank you all for joining today's workshop for the Sustainable Communities Program focused on active transportation and safety. Uh, Again, final just request to type your name and organization into the chat feature to help us know who's in the room. Alrighty, so we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us for our second of the two application workshops for our call for projects. My name is Rachel and I will be co-facilitating today's meeting with my colleague Andres Carrasquillo. So again, if you haven't already, please type your name and your organization into the chat. Also, another administrative item, wanted to let you all know that SCAG is providing closed captioning for this session. So if you'd like to activate or hide that feature, there's a live transcript button at the bottom on the bottom menu, and you can choose either the show subtitle or hide subtitle. All right, so to get over some session logistics, our workshop is scheduled for an hour and a half. As you join, you'll see that your mic is muted, and please keep it muted once we enter the Q&A portion, unless you're asking a question. If you have a question, please go ahead and type it into the chat box as we're going through the presentations, and we'll cover that at the end. And then also once we enter into our Q&A portion, you can type your questions into the chat box. And if you think of something later, you're welcome to reach out, emailing me. My email is on the screen. We also have office hours, which we'll cover later in this presentation. And so we're here, our team is available to provide support. And again, this presentation is being recorded, and we'll have the slides and the recording available after the workshop. Before we get into our session content, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement. We're currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous peoples who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in the region. If you haven't already, I encourage you all to visit native-land.ca to learn more about the traditional inhabitants of the land you live and work on. So we have our agenda on screen today. For today's workshop, we'll start by giving an overview of the program, covering the funding objectives, the project categories, and applicant eligibility. We'll then dive into the two specific project categories. First is the community/area-wide plans, and the second is quick build projects. Next, we'll talk about the Go Human resources that are available to help facilitate engagement before covering our application scoring rubric and a walkthrough of the application itself. We'll then give some tips and tricks on what makes a competitive application, as well as an application checklist, timeline, and additional resources. And then we should have plenty of time for questions. We have a few intended outcomes for this workshop. By the end, we hope that all of our attendees will understand the application timeline process, requirements, scoring rubric, and timeline. We also hope that you will understand what makes a competitive application and that you would feel prepared to apply. And again, that you'd have an opportunity to ask questions. So before we get into our content, we'd like to get a sense of who's in the room. So again, thank you for putting your name and organization in the chat. We also have a poll. We'd like to hear from you all. What county are you seeking funding in? And also what type of organization do you represent? So give folks a little bit of time to respond to that and then go over our results. All right, so we can go ahead and close the poll. So in our first session, we had representation from all of our counties. Today, we are very close. We're just missing folks from Imperial County, but certainly had that representation in the first session. Majority of our respondents today are from Los Angeles County, followed by Riverside. And then understanding who's here in the room today, the vast majority of you are with a local or regional agency, just such as a city or county. And then we've got also representation from community-based organizations. Great. Thank you so much for being here today. All right, we'll turn it over to you, Andres.
Thanks so much, Rachel. The Sustainable Communities Program is a technical assistance grant for local jurisdictions that supports implementation of regional planning goals from Connect SoCal. SCAG solicits projects in new calls for applications that align with the priorities of the Connect SoCal plan. The SCP in Active Transportation and Safety is the first call for applications following the adoption of Connect SoCal 2024. The goals of this call are to improve mobility across the region, especially for children and older adults, and people walking, biking, riding transit and rail, and using other forms of active transportation. To strategically invest in communities most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities, which include the historically disinvested communities that comprise the majority of the regional high injury network. To support a more resilient transportation network, especially in anticipation of the large-scale events hosted by the region, and to support local efforts to increase competitiveness for state and federal funding. This call for applications includes two project categories: community area-wide plans and quick build projects. No matter which type of project you choose, we want to emphasize that robust, inclusive, and equitable community engagement strategies are a required component on all projects and should be integrated into your project scopes. The maximum award for community area-wide plans is $500,000. Community plans must encompass, be located in, or overlap with a disadvantaged community. Area-wide plans must encompass at least one disadvantaged community. The maximum award for quick build projects is $900,000, and projects must engage the community before and after implementation, and they must be in place for at least 6 months before conducting evaluation. And these projects are not required to be in a disadvantaged community. Eligible applicants include local or regional agencies, Caltrans, transit agencies, natural resources or public land agencies, public schools or school districts, tribal governments, and private nonprofit tax-exempt organizations that are responsible for the management of public lands. And here we'll provide an overview of the first project category. As a partner for SCP awardees, SCAG provides extensive support of the project administration. Community area-wide plans will be completed with consultant assistance. SCAG will procure and hold the consultant contract with the awardee part of the review process. Once work begins, the project will be assigned a SCAG project manager that handles the contract administration and supports the awardee project manager. That awardee project manager will focus on the project's direction and facilitate coordination within and across departments. With the leadership of this project team, the consultant will produce the plan. And examples of those resulting plans include active transportation plans, bicycle and/or pedestrian master plans, first last mile plans focused on active transportation, safe routes plans to school for seniors, etc., and transportation safety focused plans such as local road safety plans or safe system plans with a focus on active transportation. The previous SCP call in active transportation and safety in 2020 funded plans in Montebello, Duarte, and in Banning. As noted, community and area-wide plans must benefit at least one disadvantaged community. The call guidelines allow applicants to consider one of multiple definitions of disadvantaged communities, including SCAG's priority equity communities. The dataset for SCAG's priority equity communities uses 2020 census tracts, and a tract is considered a priority equity community if there is a concentration above the county average of both low-income households and people of color, or either low-income households or people of color, and 4 or more of the following: vulnerable ages, which are 65 and over and under 18, people with disabilities, people with limited English proficiency, limited vehicle and transit access, people without a high school diploma, single parent households, and housing cost burdened households. The call considers other eligible definitions drawn from the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines, which include median household income, Cal EnviroScreen, National School Lunch Program, the Healthy Places Index, Climate and Environmental Justice Screening Tool, the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, and Native American tribal lands. Plans must include the requirements from the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines detailed in Appendix A, or explain why a component is not applicable. And those components include mode share, existing and proposed bicycle or pedestrian facilities, collision analysis, community engagement, project prioritization, implementation approach, and a resolution showing adoption of the plan. And here I will pass to Rachel. And Rachel, you are still on mute.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you for providing an overview of plans, and we'll now transition over to our quick build project category. So again, as a partner with our SCP awardees, SCAG is providing extensive support of project administration. So similar to the plan diagram, SCAG is procuring and holding a contract with a consultant that is providing engagement, design, and evaluation for the quick build. And the SCP awardee is involved with this process, such as being part of the proposal review committee and informing the final selection. So SCAG will, the PM will support the administrative services such as handling invoices and reporting, and also supporting the awardee project manager. And the awardee PM, so a city staff or county staff, et cetera, they get to focus really on the project. So providing project direction, facilitating coordination within and across departments, and also leading implementation. Wanted to pause here to talk briefly about an additional requirement that we're working through for quick build projects. We don't spend too much time in this workshop going over the funding sources, since SCAG is really handling the process of allocating funds and doing the quarterly reporting. But the funding sources for quick build projects for the SCP, that includes ATP Cycle 7 and also a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant that SCAG received in fiscal year 23. As many of you may know, in June of this year, the state enacted the final budget, and that budget included a reduction in the funding that's available for ATP Cycle 7. So as a result, this SCP call has less ATP funds than initially anticipated, and that ATP funds was intended to help serve as a as matching funds for this SS4A grant. So we are currently working internally to provide an update to our guidelines, and SCAG Regional Council will be reviewing them in September, but we anticipate that the awardee PM, so city, county, other awardee staff, will be responsible for documenting essentially the staff time, so that in-kind contribution to the project. This is not a local match requirement, but rather it's essentially requiring documentation of staff time that's already being spent attending check-in meetings, coordinating across your departments, and also leading implementation. So all of that staff time that goes into procurement of the quick build. So this is a new development, really. It's our how we are reacting to the budget cuts for cycle 7, and the SCP team will be providing resources and additional information for documenting the staff time for in-kind contributions for the quick build projects. So I wanted to briefly introduce that, but more information is coming. So just to kind of continue with this administration, the awardee PM, again, in addition to helping manage the project, will also lead implementation. And so implementation can happen in 2 ways. One can be through agency staff. So if you have public works capacity to, put down that striping, install the plastic posts, et cetera, or go through a process of procuring a contractor. And so although the procurement of a design and engagement consultant goes through SCAG, the actual procurement of a contractor to install the quick build will go through the awardee jurisdiction process, since each jurisdiction is different, has different requirements. So, and then the last part, as mentioned, a consultant will be procured for engagement, design, and evaluation. All right, so moving on from the project administration, wanted to make sure everyone in the room today is familiar with what a quick build actually is. So a quick build is a type of project that implements near-term bicycle, pedestrian, or traffic safety improvements. And these projects use durable, low to medium cost materials and can be easily changed or removed. So we have a few examples that we will go through for quick build elements, but as you think about what might be a qualifying element, kind of take this definition into consideration and assess your proposed project. Does it have the low to medium cost, and can these materials be easily changed or removed? So we have a graphic on the screen here that kind of shows in the spectrum of project types where quick builds fall. So on the very left-hand side, it's a demonstration project, which many of you likely have participated or helped facilitate one, especially if you've used SCAG's Go Human Kit of Parts. So this is very, very temporary, just putting up maybe some signage, some cones, some taping down RAM board, really just to demonstrate a type of project or improvement for a couple hours or maybe a couple days. On the right-hand side is permanent installation. These are your larger construction projects. You have excavation, pouring concrete, and a lot more detailed, maybe like environmental and whatnot. And so quick builds really fall in the middle. They are serving as a pilot project, maybe testing out a design to see, does this curb extension help with slowing down vehicle speeds? Does it improve pedestrian visibility? And then maybe you find the turning radius is not quite right, so it's pretty easy to make those adjustments. So that's a pilot project. Or a quick build can also serve as an interim design. So again, because the materials are low to medium cost and easily implemented, maybe put a design in the near term as your jurisdiction is working on securing more permanent or a larger amount of funding to get that permanent project into place. So as noted, we'll share a few examples of quick build elements, but this is not fully comprehensive. So if you have any questions, if the type of design or element you're thinking of, if it's eligible, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk through that. So on the left-hand side, some examples of a protected bike lane. In the city of Ojai, the city used paint, some planters, and rubber curb or armadillos to test that out. And in the city of Long Beach, they use striping to do parking protected a bike path or bike facility. On the right-hand side, we have an example of a neighborhood traffic circle. This is in the city of El Monte, where they used rubber curbs, plastic posts, and signage to test out a traffic circle in a stop-controlled intersection. Couple more examples. So several ways to enhance pedestrian infrastructure. One is the curb extensions that I had mentioned. So here's a photo from also from El Monte, where the city used paint and plastic posts to really bring out that curb. And a more permanent version of this curb extension would be filling that with concrete. Also, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or RRFBs, are another example of a quick build. Here's an example from the city of Oxnard. And then finally, on the right-hand side, temporary transit platforms, which they're large, but they are not being permanently installed to the ground, are another example of a quick build element. And the photo on the screen here is in city of LA. We also want to show a few examples of kind of comprehensive quick build projects. So here's one in the city of Glendale, where they, along Brand Boulevard, the city is piloting a protected bike lane along with curb extensions, and also made some adjustments to parking to facilitate these improvements. And then another example here, kind of expanding on that zoomed in image of the traffic circle. This is again in El Monte. It's along Mountain View Road. It's a little small, but you can see on the screen at the bottom, there's an aerial view of this intersection. It's stop controlled with 5 legs approaching. So the city saw some issues and challenges with vehicle speeds and conflicts between different modes, as the space to navigate through the intersection was quite large. So the city filled the middle with a traffic circle to see if that can help slow down speeds and help with circulation, and also installed upgrading to high visibility crosswalks to improve pedestrian visibility, and also curb extensions to, again, improve pedestrian visibility, but also slow down vehicle speeds. So briefly want to talk about the quick build process. As a whole, you can think of it as a quick build is iterative and flexible. So these we have timeframes associated with each phase, but it's just an estimate. And again, it can be very flexible depending on the project needs. So we start off with outreach and an initial design. This can be anywhere from 6 months to a year. Ideally, this process wouldn't be too long, because you really want to get that project in the ground so you can get community feedback and see how people are interacting with the space. So implementation can take just a few days or a few months. It just depends on the scope of your project. Is it multiple intersections or a short or a long corridor? So that really drives how long it takes to implement. And then you want to have your project in for some time, at least 6 months ideally, and it can go up to 3 years or even longer. Again, these are just general estimates. So evaluation can include observations of how people are navigating the space, surveys, and collecting data such as bicycle and pedestrian counts, and vehicle speeds. And then based on the evaluation, opportunities to modify that design. And we have that time frame of 6 months to 5 years, typically because these materials, because they are low to medium cost, they're durable but not permanent. So if a plastic post gets knocked over, you'll need to replace that, or maybe the striping starts to fade away. So as you modify the design, you get back into implementation of making those design changes. So you see that circular iterative process in the middle. And then the quick build process can lead to maybe a permanent project, getting additional funding, or removing the project and going and trying out a different design. As part of your application for a quick build, applicants will need to submit a conceptual plan. This is to essentially create a scope of work and indicate the plans for your quick build. So this is an example from the city of Santa Monica. You can see it's quite high level. So you have an aerial map and you have lines indicating where you would have, upgrade to a continental or high visibility crosswalk, some painted medians or installing RRFBs, etc. So this is really just to show the initial ideas to make that connection between the needs of a project area and how this quick build is looking to address it. But because the quick build design has a significant engagement component, as the project goes through the community engagement process and working with a technical advisory committee, this plan that's submitted as part of the application, it's totally fine if it changes. And even after implementation, again, there's that iterative process where modifications can be made to the design. Wanted to go over a few quick build project requirements. So to reflect the intent of a quick build project serving as an engagement tool and also a mechanism to implement near-term improvements, quick builds require the following that are listed on the screen. So first is ongoing community engagement. The engagement will help shape the final design and also inform evaluation. Data collection is also a critical component, not only to establish existing conditions, but also to do evaluation with your before and after counts. The final design will need to be reviewed, approved, and stamped by a licensed professional engineer, as this is a design that is being rolled out and implemented into the physical environment. The project will be installed for a minimum of 6 months, and this is really intended to give people a chance to just get familiar with the design and let kind of maybe changing travel patterns or travel habits change before conducting evaluation. And then also a final report to summarize all the work that's been completed and also make recommendations for next steps. The final report is intended not only just to document all that has been done, but also hopefully to serve as a kind of an input to maybe a future grant application to show documentation of all the work that's been done to conduct engagement and get to whatever permanent project that an applicant may be applying for. All right. Now, moving on to our engagement resources. As noted in the SCP program guidelines, projects are expected to incorporate one or both of the following engagement resources from the Go Human team from SCAG. So first is the Go Human Kit of Parts. This is a tool to demonstrate complete streets elements. So we have an image on the screen here that illustrates the kit of parts in action. You see it's kind of your standard crosswalk, but then there's RAM board and some paint that's been laid out to illustrate what an artistic crosswalk may look like. Other elements of the kit of parts include a parklet and also materials to do a curb extension. There's also a traffic safety awareness campaign that can be incorporated, and this includes co-branded Go Human print and digital advertisements. So these resources, in addition to being available through this call for projects, they're also just generally available to cities and other local government agencies in the SCAG region for no cost. So here's an example of making that connection of how engagement can fit into a larger project. So in the city of Long Beach, in the Washington neighborhood, on the left-hand side, the city deployed a kit of parts demonstration. So you see that there's kind of curb extension that is laid out with art that was completed by the community and participants. And on the right-hand side, this kit of parts demonstration was transformed into a quick build where the curb extensions were painted and also identified with plastic posts. All right, and I'll turn it back over to you, Andres.
Thanks, Rachel. All applications in each of the project categories are scored on 6 criteria. Mobility for 25 points, safety benefit, 35 points, public health, 10 points, disadvantaged communities, 10 points, public participation, 15 points, and cost effectiveness, 5 points. Final awards will be based on application score, geographic distribution across the region, and funding eligibility. And I will briefly demonstrate our online application. Okay. On the SCP website, let me just make sure I have my bearings here. You will scag.ca.gov. You'll want to scroll down to this call and the Start Application button. And if you click that, you will then be sent to our JotForm application system. You have the option to make your own JotForm account. This allows you to save your progress on an application. So the application is organized in a few categories, the first being the general information. And here you will fill out information about your agency, your contact information, as well as some kind of an overview of your project proposal. And as Rachel mentioned about the local match or the in-kind match, if you have the option to kind of estimate what your local match would be here in question number 18. And if this question does not apply to you, you can type in an A. If your agency is applying for submitting multiple applications, you have the option to rate the priority of each application. At the end of this first section, you can select the project type, community area-wide plan, or quick build. There are specific questions for each project type. So in this online application, it's important to select the correct one. So here in each of those evaluation criteria, you can see there are a variety of questions, as well as opportunities to upload supporting attachments, such as for your scope of work, schedule and budget, your maps, as well as letters of support. And then I will finish sharing here, and Jennifer, you could put the PowerPoint back on the screen. Thank you very much. We have a detailed evaluation rubric available on our website under the applicant resources section. I will also include a link in the chat. In that same applicant resources section on our website, you will find templates for the scope of work, schedule, and budget. Each template provides detailed instructions that can help you complete each document. The scope of work template is laid out to be your starting point, and applicants should modify the activities as needed and identify the deliverables for each. The schedule is part of the scope of work template document. All tasks and subtasks should match the scope of work, and the schedule should provide a realistic overview of the time needed to complete each project or complete your project. And projects typically have up to 36 months for completion. The budget template file provides 3 versions of a budget template based on project category and indirect cost rate. The budget template provides detailed instructions in the Read Me First tab that help applicants choose the correct version. So please provide that your budget by task and be sure your tasks match with the scope of work. As a reminder, community and area-wide plans are completed by a consultant, so the budget should be in the consultant line item. Quick Builds will use a consultant for planning and engagement. For Quick Build implementation, applicants can either use a contractor or city staff. These costs, as well as Quick Build material, should be budgeted by task and in the appropriate line. For Quick Build projects, applicants may use a federally approved indirect cost rate. And if you have any questions about this, your agency's finance staff can help. As you prepare your application, please keep these things in mind. First, review the guidelines and the scoring rubric, and make sure that you respond directly to each question of the application. Make connections to ConnectSoCal 2024. The guidelines provide links to relevant passages in that plan. Finally, provide context. What does the evaluator need to know to understand the safety and mobility needs of your project area? A complete application includes the following: an online application, project map, scope of work, schedule, and proposed budget, a conceptual plan for quick build projects, and 3 letters of support. This call for applications opened on July 8th. To support the application period, we are hosting these application workshops and have open office hours with SCAG staff. The call will close on September 27, and we will evaluate applications in October and November. We anticipate award recommendations to be made in December, with formal approval following in June 2025. In the late summer and early fall of 2025, we will develop MOUs and begin the procurement process. I will pass along to Rachel now.
All right, before we go on to our next slide, we have a poll to just check in to see how you're all feeling about applying to our program. So if we could get that poll initiated. We have one question that asks the type of project that you're seeking funding for. So the plan, quick build project, both or not sure yet. And then also just wanted to get a temperature check for the room. How much do you agree with the following statement? I feel ready to apply. Give a couple more seconds. All right, so go ahead and close the poll. So first question, what type of project are you seeking funding for? We've got a pretty even distribution. Most folks are interested in submitting an application for a plan. We've got about a quarter for quick build projects, and then a couple both. That's very exciting. And then a few that are still undecided. So if you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out. And then how much do you agree with the following statement? I feel ready to apply. We've got a bit of a spread between some folks don't feel quite ready, and then the other half kind of agree and strongly agree that you do feel ready to apply. So for those of you who that said you don't feel quite ready, as Andres mentioned, we have a lot of applicant resources. So this is available on the SCP webpage. If you scroll down maybe 3/4 of the way down the page, you'll see a section with links to applicant resources. We have our program guidelines, a fact sheet that provides a high-level overview. This can help perhaps initiate conversations with your jurisdiction. Also a link to our application. And then you see there's a PDF and Word version of the application. Oh, sorry. So there's a PDF of application resources. This has links to a variety of data sources such as collision data, public health data, and also instructions on how to use SCAG's Priority Equity Communities web map. So hopefully that can help with crafting answers to the application questions and also find data points to really strengthen those answers. And then we have a Word and PDF version of the application questions along with the evaluation criteria. This resource is intended to help your jurisdiction or your team maybe collaborate on the application, typing your responses in the Word document and circulating that internally before adding to the jot form. And then also there's evaluation criteria for each of the questions, so you can get a sense of what sort of kind of key points, what sort of project elements are we looking for to have the most competitive application. And then again, as Andres went over, there's links to scope of work and budget template. And when you click on those, that will be automatically downloaded. All righty. So now we have time for Q&A. So I'll open up the chat to see if we have any questions thus far. We have Krista from our team helping with questions. Krista, I'm just scrolling through trying to look here. Have we had any questions in the chat yet? I don't think I'm seeing any. All right, okay, I see okay, so a question from Ellie asking if this recording will be sent out. Yes, this recording will be shared. We'll also be posting it to our SCP webpage. So the recording and the slide deck will be shared out. A question from Corey asking if cities can opt out of technical assistance. So the short answer is no. This is a technical assistance program, and we're hopeful that although there's kind of an added element of SCAG involved in this process, we hope that this technical assistance will overall be really helpful for your staff who are often juggling a lot of responsibilities. SCAG staff are handling, requesting allocation either from Caltrans for the ATP funds or coordinating with FHWA for the SS4A funding. And we're handling all of the reporting that happens on a quarterly basis, processing invoices. So hopefully that can help with reducing the administrative time that staff need to spend on a project and really just focus on the project delivery itself. Another question, will the SCAG managed consultant be available for community engagement during and after the project? I'm not sure if this is for the plans or for the quick build, but I can speak to both. So for plans, the SCAG consultant will be available for the duration of the planning efforts. If your jurisdiction would like to continue working that consultant following the kind of the time or the extent of the SCAG funded contract, we'll leave that to you as the awardee. But for quick builds, the goal is that the quick build implementation would happen maybe in the middle or closer to the beginning of your project. So as Andres mentioned, projects are typically in that 36-month or 3-year timeframe. So with a quick build, in the first year, you're doing engagement and finalizing your design. Maybe it takes, let's say, 2 months to implement a quick build. You wait about 6 months for the project to be in place. And then the consultant would still be on board and available to do additional community engagement afterwards, conducting surveys and maybe facilitating the community advisory committee meetings to gather feedback and also conduct evaluation. So for specifically for quick builds, yes, it's the consultants available before and after implementation, but overall, whether it's a plan or a quick build, the consultant is available for the duration of the contract. have a question from Matthews. Does the community area-wide plan grant offer assistance with implementation of the plan? So for a planning grant, the funds and the consultant support will cover the actual development of the plan. Kind of again, as Andres mentioned, the plans need to follow what's outlined in the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines of required elements of a plan. And so in terms of implementation, there will be sections around funding and also an implementation strategy. But then to actually implement the plan that was just developed, that would require either city funds or securing additional funding opportunities. Question from Corey, will projects be procured in bundles or individually? That's a great question. So that's something that we are working through internally. So likely for plans, unless it really makes sense to bundle, those planning projects will likely be procured on an individual basis, as there will likely be kind of specific context or needs. But we really have to see which projects are ultimately selected to make that decision. And then for the quick build projects, we're exploring various options to see what is feasible and permitted under the grant funds that we are using. We're hoping that since a lot of quick builds, although the projects are not going to be like the same, but kind of the process is similar. So we're looking to see if we may be able to create sort of like an on-call or a bench for the quick build projects, but that's something we're still working through with Caltrans and FHWA. But ultimately, once we have our final awardee list, that'll help inform the best way to move ahead. A question from Emilio. Can an agency submit multiple community/area-wide plan applications for multiple planning documents? Yes, your agency can submit however many applications you'd like. As Andres was showing on the application preview on JotForm, you just need to indicate what priority. Is this number 3 of 4, or is this number 1 of 4, etc. The next question is, if the Quick Build pilot project is widely popular and supported by community, can it become a permanent project? So I think there's 2 ways to answer this question. One is kind of quote permanent in terms of just leaving the Quick Build material. So, leaving the striping and the plastic posts. Yes, that's totally fine. There's no requirement that once you install your project there's no requirement that you have to modify it or you have to remove it. Like once it's implemented, it's up to you as a jurisdiction. It can certainly become permanent if the jurisdiction decides to pursue more permanent funding, maybe through the ATP for an infrastructure project or some other funding source. Another question from Corey. For quick builds, how will funds be allocated for the implementation portion? So for the ATP funds, the quick build process has evolved over time, but with Cycle 7, just the whole construction or the whole quick build project will be allocated as construction. So it's not like split between maybe non-infrastructure and construction. It's just fully construction. So in the ATP guidelines, they frame it as it's a build or a design build, but regardless, it's in that construction allocation. For the SS4A funds, Andres, do you have any insights? I don't know if there's different phases through FHWA or if it's just kind of this is the federal funding and we're going to design and then implement.
Yeah, there may be some phasing involved with the those federal funds, and that's due to the requirements to have clearance through NEPA in place. So it just depends on when that clearance is complete, that would make the funding for the actual implementation available. But we're in, all of our projects are still geared it towards the same anticipated timeframe of 36 months. So the SCAG staff, once awards have been made, will be working with individual awardees to get all of those requirements in place to ensure that there's a timely disbursement of funds. But there may be a kind of an initial award and then an allocation of sometime after that.
Great, thank you, Andres. And I just want to know if you have any follow-up questions to our answers to your questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can talk those through. Couple more questions from Ellie. For the letters of support, should they be more geared towards municipal or transit entities or more community-based, such as nonprofit groups? So the application will require three letters of support. This is not scored, but it's really to help us as evaluators ensure that there is really that community or partner support. So I would say it really depends on your project, but I think because there's three letters of support required, that is an opportunity to, let's say if you're doing a school related project, would be great to show that there's been conversations between the city and the school, or if there's a CBO that's been involved in maybe advocating for a project to have a letter from the CBO. So I know it's not a straightforward answer, but I would say it's really should be kind of reflecting your project, kind of who would likely be the partners. Is it if it's a public health agency submitting and they're showing they've coordinated with the public works department, showing that sort of support and coordination. Another question from Ellie. For the community/area-wide plan budgeting, if we are using a SCAG procured consultant to do the planning work, how should we budget the amounts to tasks, since that will be determined by what SCAG's procured rate is? Just to clarify, SCAG does not have set rates for consultants. We don't have a rate like, an assistant planner gets X rate versus a principal gets X rate. It's ultimately, we're going through very similar to a local city or county going through a procurement process where we put out that scope of work, here's the budget range, and consultants will have varying rates. So I would say look to similar projects that you have done in your jurisdiction. Just maybe take estimates of those rates. You could kind of maybe do a blended rate to say, okay, on average, we think a consultant hourly rate is X. Or you could kind of do a process where you start off by breaking down by, principal, project manager, assistant planner, and do sort of those calculations. But for SCAG, we don't need to see that breakdown of how you got to how much funding you think should be kind of allocated per task. And what your jurisdiction submits, it's not going to be the final budget for your project. It's really to help us see that as an applicant, you've put thought into that there is a connection between what the scope of work is and how much budget you anticipate would be needed. Just so, let's say you put forth a proposal or a project application, a plan application for 300,000, and that budgeting process is really intended to help ensure that the scope of work matches how much funding is being requested. It's not that it's a request for $300,000, but then the scope of work is actually $500,000 worth of work. So it does require a little bit of digging in terms of figuring out what's a reasonable rate, just maybe based on plans from your jurisdiction or maybe nearby, but just to really make that connection between the scope of work and the funding request. We have another question. Can you give a bit more detail on the type of data collection you would expect? So I'm not sure if this is specifically for the plans or the quick builds, but just to talk a little bit about both. So with the development of a plan, again, in the ATP Cycle 7 guidelines, they have their Appendix A that kind of goes through the kind of required elements or expected elements of a plan. And if there's, and the guidelines do indicate if there's something that doesn't, is not applicable for your plan, you would just indicate why it's not applicable. And that's really, again, where our requirements are generally shaped by our funding requirements. So with a plan, you'd want to have a sense of, for your whatever area that you're analyzing, what are the existing conditions, maybe bicycle and pedestrian mode share, an understanding of collision trends, maybe the land use characteristics, existing facilities, etc. That's also really similar for a quick build. You'd want to understand kind of the existing context. But critically for a quick build, you definitely want to gather data around bicycle and pedestrian volumes, vehicle volumes. So it's either depending on your project, whether it's a corridor or maybe several intersections. If you would figure out, does it make sense to do roadway counts versus turning movement counts? And then also you'd want to get some speeds, as many of the quick build projects will be around trying to make a more complete street or kind of supporting bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So how might those projects affect vehicle speeds? Also, I will note, as Andres went over in our resources, we have scope of work templates. Those are shaped by the ATP and SS4A requirements for projects. So that's a starting point. You'll see in the scope of work, there's examples in like the existing conditions task of the type of data that should be collected, or with the quick builds and the evaluation task, there's some information on data that could be collected. Question for Corey. So for quick builds, typically a construction budget assumes 20 to 25% of a design budget. Quick builds require more evaluation than a typical construction. What percent of budget should be assumed towards design/evaluation versus construction/implementation? This is a very good question. And my answer is, unfortunately, it depends on the project. I will say, based on some of the projects that we've had, for the most part, we've seen almost an even split between what the consultant is doing in terms of design, engagement, and evaluation, and then the other half going towards implementation, which covers the physical materials and the paint, plastic posts, RRFBs, etc., and the labor to implement those. And the reason I say it really depends on the project is because it depends on what materials you're looking to use. If it's paint and some plastic posts, that'll be a lower cost than something. Maybe if you're looking at kind of unique elements that are not commonly used as you explore what might be a good fit for your quick build project, or if there's like the modular transit stops. So it really depends. I would say take a look at the materials that you think would be a good fit for your design, do some research on the typical costs, and that can help kind of work backwards into what makes sense for the design, engagement, and evaluation versus the actual implementation of the quick build. Because it'll also depend, is your project just one block in front of a school, for example, or is it 10 intersections, or is it a corridor that may require, maybe if you're testing out a, reconfiguring the roadway space such that maybe instead of having 2 travel lanes, you want to go down to 1. So, thinking about what sort of labor does it take to change the striping. So it really is driven by the design that you are proposing for your project. Next question is, can the creation of an ongoing community advisory group for a quick build project replace the requirement for extensive community engagement? So a community advisory group would ideally be one component of the overall quick build project. If you take a look at the evaluation criteria with our application questions, you will see there is a question around community engagement. So, technically, yes, you could propose to say our only engagement is a community advisory committee. But in practice, just based on the rubric, unless you have a very clear, compelling case as to why a CAC is sufficient and that's it, I would say it would be a less competitive application than putting a slightly more robust community engagement effort. Next question is, if we have a consulting group we historically work with, will they have an opportunity to bid to potentially become the SCAG procured consultant? In other words, what should we tell them? So any consultant is eligible to apply for an RFP put out by SCAG. We can't guarantee that that consultant will score highest and be selected. It's a competitive process. I would say, if a consultant has worked with your city or jurisdiction for a long time, then naturally they would have a good understanding of the community needs, kind of the approach, and be really responsive to the RFP. But so they may naturally have, be competitive, but at the end of the day, it is a competitive process, but those consulting groups are eligible to bid on a project. Andres, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so the specific question about like what should an applicant or a future awardee tell kind of those consultants? I think SCAG will be working, very closely with each one of our awardees throughout the procurement process. And so our contracts administrators will be taking on a lot of like the communication and the outreach, primarily through our Planet Bids platform. So if there's any kind of firms that the awardees are, they want notified, we'll just kind of share that contact information with our contract administrators who will take on that outreach. So it'll all kind of really be funneled through them, but we'll be working throughout that that process with those awardees to better understand kind of who they want to do outreach to. Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Andres. Okay, the question from Derek. How competitive is this program relative to some of the similar programs? That's an interesting question. At the end of the day, the competition is shaped by the number of applications that we will receive. Our team, I feel like, has done a lot of engagement thus far. We've done presentations at various working group meetings, had a lot of one-on-one conversations. So I would say it's probably relatively, it's less competitive because you're competing within the SCAG region. So for example, this versus the ATP at the statewide level, the ATP is much more competitive. I would say at the end of the day, take a look at the evaluation criteria. We try to be as transparent as possible. Like, you will get maximum scores if your project reflects this. So I would say really take a look at the evaluation criteria, look at the requirements for the plan or the quick builds, and hopefully that can help your team decide, does it make sense for us to apply? And if you have any questions of, is this project eligible? Does this make sense? Or do you have any feedback on this project idea? Like, please feel free to reach out. Again, as Andres mentioned, we have office hours on Monday afternoons and Thursday mornings. And if that time doesn't work, you're welcome to reach out and we can find another time to chat. Question from Corey. Who are the evaluators of the SCP applications? Is it county transportation commissions, other cities? So the evaluators vary a little bit with each call for projects, but generally we do have staff from county transportation commissions or public health agencies, staff who are doing related work to active transportation. We also have folks from Caltrans, And then there's SCAG staff who are also involved with active transportation projects. And then we're also reaching out to community-based organization representatives to just have a more holistic perspective. And so as stated in the guidelines, we'll have at least 6 evaluation teams, 1 for each county. And if a specific county gets a lot of applications, we may need to break off and have additional evaluator teams. But overall, we solicit evaluators who, one, are not submitting an application because that would be a conflict of interest. And then also folks who are familiar with this field that do work related to active transportation and safety, complete streets, etc. Thank you all for the many questions, really good questions, very engaged. We really appreciate it. We are taking all these questions and noting them down and essentially creating a FAQ document. So this will be available as an additional resource. And as we've mentioned several times, this is also recorded, so you can always come back in and check out a few slides or the discussion on specific topics. We'll also have the slides available. But I'll give folks maybe a minute or two to see if any other questions come up. Feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. We can go over those questions. Andres, did we have any questions that were submitted in the registration that we did not cover today? I know I
Let me,
took a look, but I don't recall all of them.
let me make sure. Um, so maybe this was covered, but just to be abundantly clear, there was a question, can an entity pursue funding that is used to hire a consultant to amend and improve an existing community or area-wide plan?
That is a good question. It also came up in our first session. So let's say you have an active transportation plan that is several years old and you're looking to make an update, that is certainly eligible. It would still go through that process of, the SCAG procurement process. So it wouldn't necessarily be that you had a consultant A work on your plan, and so you want to have consultant A work on it again. It'd have to go through that competitive process. But in terms of applying, you're certainly welcome to submit an application to say, we'd like to update our active transportation plan. And as you'll see in the application questions, you'll document, here's the need for it, here's the engagement, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, I think that was the question, the total number of questions that weren't already covered.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, again, thank you everyone for these fabulous questions. We really appreciate your attention and engagement. If anything else comes up, a lot of resources out there, so we're here to help, but really appreciate your time today and participation. And so we'll wrap up today's workshop. And if anything comes up, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, everyone.